Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only improve your health, but also increase your longevity and improve your quality of life. And we have something that is coming up right at the start of the new year, that if you are interested in using exercise to build the health and function of your body, you are definitely going to want to check this out. Julie, you want to tell them more about it?
Yeah, so on January 3rd, we are starting our third One Workout Away Challenge. And what this One Workout Away Challenge is it kind of was born out of the necessity of people being like, dang, I really like your content, but I want some guided application. So that is exactly what the One Workout Away Challenge is. It is $27 for 28 days. And through those 28 days, which is 4 weeks, we're going to be guiding you through live workouts, which you could do on replay if you can't join us live, so that you can do the workouts, get the cueing, get the concepts in your brain while you're exercising. But not only that, one of the biggest things that's different about our One Workout Away Challenge relative to other health or fitness challenges is that we have a huge educational component, because every challenge has to end, but your journey with fitness does not end at the end of that challenge. So intertwined into the weeks, we are having tons of educational content that you can listen to while you're driving or tune in quickly during your lunch break. So every Monday, we have different topics that we're talking about to educate you on how to continue to use this thing called exercise to keep you living a healthy lifestyle and exercising for life. Each day of the week, we have different activities and events happening to encourage and reinforce these concepts, but we would love to see you in the group. And all you have to do is go to owa.matschaumburg.com and you can read all about the challenge, get more details about the challenge. But as you know, as I already shared, it's only $27. All you have to have is about 30 minutes max per day. And that's not every day you have to have that. And then you also have to have a Facebook account, because we do have a private Facebook group that we run this group through. So we are so excited about our third challenge coming up January 3rd, and we hope to see you in the group.
So today, our episode is actually a reshare of another podcast that both Julie and I were on back in June called the Mammoth Health podcast. And the host of that podcast is Brady Seignieous. And Brady Seignieous, he's a young guy, he's super eager to learn, and he wanted to interview Julie and me about our experience with MAT, with the RTS education process, and kind of our backstory of how we've gone through those education programs and built them into what we now have as Muscle Activation Schaumburg. So enjoy this episode, our interview with Brady Seignieous, and definitely check out the Mammoth Health podcast on YouTube.
I want to thank you for doing this. I really appreciate this. So currently I'm an exercise science major at Georgia College and State University. And right now I'm studying to get my NSCA certified personal training over the summer. It's very stressful, even with, the background in exercise science. And I'm trying to decide kind of what I want to do for grad school. And so we have our own athletic training program that's a master's degree. And, I'm kind of looking into that, but then I also realized that MAT offers its own master degree. And so a part of what I wanted to talk about was kind of some of that. I'm very interested in, manual muscle techniques, trying to figure out ways we can really help people beyond what traditional chiropractic or personal training or physical therapy generally does. So scary statistic for you. I don't know where I got this from. It was one of my professors, but they say physical therapy on average is only effective 30% of the time. Wow. And so I feel that things like MAT need to be brought more to people's attention because it could be utilized in a way that is able to help people better. So I guess first question, what is MAT?
So MAT is a process by which you can assess somebody's body to figure out where they have muscles that aren't able to contract well. And then once you identify those muscles, then the next step of the process is the activation component. So it's identifying the muscles, assessing for muscles that aren't working well, and then addressing muscles that aren't working well so they can start working better. And then you can, and so that's the MAT process. And then from there, they can kind of transition into more regular exercise. They can go about, their daily life, whatever they want to do. Now they have muscles that are working well and working as they're supposed to.
Right. So Greg Roscoff, who's the creator of MAT, one of the things I've mostly heard him talk about, especially on the podcast where you guys interviewed him, was how MAT's kind of main view on flexibility is that your ability to be flexible is based off of how strong all of your muscles are kind of simultaneously. And so hamstring tightness isn't normally hamstring tightness. It could be something is weak somewhere else and your hamstrings need to be tight in order to protect that other muscle.
Actually, so the way we like to sum that idea up is we say that tightness is secondary to weakness, okay? Meaning that tightness comes because weakness is present. And oftentimes, if you think about, well, how do traditionally, we deal with tightness? Normally, it's like, oh, I got tight hamstrings. Let's stretch that, massage it, foam roll it, do all the stuff to the hamstring. And as you mentioned before, with some of the lack of results with a lot of the techniques, if you know people with tight hamstrings or tight low back or tight whatever they have, tight calves, whatever they have, they probably stretch, massage, and foam roll that stuff like all the time. And they always think they're not doing it enough because they're not getting results. And that's because tightness is secondary to weakness, which means that it comes after, and it comes because there is the presence of weakness. And so what we find with MAT is that because the goal of MAT, we just want muscles to work the way they're supposed to work. We're not trying to solve itises or things that are labeled like, oh, I've got, bursitis or I've got tendinitis. Well, all we try to do is we try to get muscles to function the way they're supposed to. And all muscles do is contract. They can only do one action. There's only one action they can do, which is contract. So we're always restoring muscles' ability to contract when they're unable to contract. And what we find time and time and time again, and every MAT specialist sees this all the time, is that when we restore a muscle's ability to create tension, to create a contraction, which is, again, the only job that a muscle does, is that tightness goes away if it was caused by the muscle system. And so these people that come in to see us, clients, they're like, what? I've been stretching this for 5 years. How did you fix that in 1 hour? Like, well, you've been addressing the tightness, and the tightness wasn't the cause. The tightness was your discomfort, for sure. It was your symptom, for sure. But what we're doing is we're looking at, well, if we can, what can we do to what can we do to the muscle system to restore its ability to be good at being muscles? And when we do that, a lot of issues resolve themselves. I'm not saying it resolves everything, but it's resolved everything I've ever experienced. I don't know if that made sense, but
no, that makes total sense. And it's kind of going exactly as you say. As I said, I'm studying to get my CPT right now, and I just went over the flexibility chapter in the book, and it's going over just generic static stretching, dynamic stretching, PNF, and most people only know about static stretching, and so I feel like there's a dire need for people to be more educated about these, because it wasn't until last year that I learned about PNF stretching. I'd never heard of that, and first time I tried it on my hamstrings, I probably was able to raise my hand, my femur, maybe another 2 inches or whatever. I don't know what degrees, but yeah. So there's a neurological component people forget when it comes to tightness.
Yeah, big time. And to your point, it's so we were so focused on the what we believe the material issue is. The hamstrings are tight. That means materially they're tight, like something's wrong with the structure of the hamstrings. And so we need to try to elongate that structure. We need to try to, like the name says, stretch out the material of the hamstrings and say, well, okay, but there are other components. And even though it feels that way, if we really dive into, well, what are all the components of a muscle contracting, the nervous system is a huge piece. And so if we can influence the nervous system through something like MAT, then we can see drastic changes as far as how much the tissues on one side can shorten, and then conversely, how much the tissues on the opposite side of the body can lengthen. And so that then, just like Julie was saying, that's what we see all the time when we get muscles contracting better and muscles are able to shorten better. Muscles on the opposite side of the body are able to then lengthen better.
Right. And it makes total sense if you kind of think about that and play that out. So how did y'all first learn about MAT?
Yeah. So for me, the first job that I had after college, I was working at a gym in downtown Chicago. And there were two MAT practitioners there. And I'd never seen MAT before. I'd never heard of it before. But my body was pretty broken. I was, a former college athlete. I just recently stopped playing college basketball, and my body was broken. I mean, I couldn't run for more than 10 minutes without the entire right side of my body tightening up, from my foot to my ankle, my knee, hip, low back, mid back, shoulder blade, everything just on my right side would get super tight. And the other thing was I couldn't work out really hard. Now, I would try to work out really hard, and it would look like I was working out really hard, but I always felt really beat up, always felt really achy after my workouts, always felt really tight after my workouts. And kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, I was stretching like crazy. Like I would spend 20 minutes after every workout stretching. I would spend, another 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of my workout doing more dynamic stretches, doing foam rolling. At the end, I would come back and I would roll on a PVC pipe. I use a lacrosse ball, and then I spend another 20 minutes doing static stretches. So, I mean, it was like an hour a day I'm working on, I'd do all these mobility drills at the beginning to try to open up my hips, all this stuff, right? And yet I was chronically feeling tight, chronically feeling stiff, and feeling really not great. And it was not a good place to be, because my identity was super tied into being able to work out really hard and feeling like I could help other people perform well too. And so when I saw these two specialists at the gym I was working at doing MAT, like I said, I'd never seen it before. I'd never heard of it before. But it looked like they were doing this kind of weird pseudo stretching thing. And, I would take my clients to the back of the gym, and they'd be at the back of the gym. I'd be stretching my clients, and they'd be doing MAT. And so, we'd just be talking and stuff. And so I would get interested in what they were telling me, but I kept having questions. Like, okay, what is MAT? What is it? What are you trying to do? And I was having difficulty understanding what they were trying to say and how they were trying to explain it. So eventually one of them said, you know what, just hop on the table. Let me show you. And I was very fortunate to never have any kind of severe injuries, anything that required surgery or any ruptures or anything like that. But like I said, my body was still broken. I had a lot of issues going on that were symptomatic. And the other thing was I was pretty disconnected from my body. So when I got on the table, and one of our colleagues was putting me through my first MAT session, I really couldn't tell what was going on. I couldn't tell how well my hips were moving. When he would do muscle testing, I couldn't tell when muscles were strong or weak. And the only thing that I kind of remember that I could tell is when he would, push where the muscles were attaching to try to stimulate the tissues, that it was super uncomfortable. And that's a sign that like those areas were really inflamed. But, I had no idea. I was just 22 years old at the time, thinking, I'm super fit, super strong. But deep down, like, again, knowing my body was broken. And so having this experience. And the thing is, again, I couldn't really tell how my body was moving. I couldn't really tell when things were weak or strong, but as he was working through, all these light bulbs started going off in my head. And what I realized that he was trying to do was just trying to get the muscular system working the way it was supposed to work. And to me, I fell in love with that concept because to me, that was the key to getting somebody to be able to perform well from a sports performance perspective, and for getting somebody to be able to just live well from, a general exercise and life perspective is, hey, if I could get somebody's body working the way it was supposed to work, they'd perform at a much higher level, they would have fewer issues going on, and they'd be able to do all the things in life that they wanted to do. So for me, I fell in love with that concept of just trying to get the muscles working the way they were supposed to work, and I dove headfirst into the classes from there.
I was actually struggling with plantar fasciitis, and I met this person. I didn't know what MAT was, and he was like, let me just show you MAT. You seem like you know some anatomy. I was like, yeah, I really like anatomy. I was probably like right in your shoes. I was like just finishing up my bachelor's degree in exercise science. I thought personal trainers didn't know very much because for some reason I knew more than them. Like, why didn't none of them know anatomy? Aren't they like supposed to know this stuff? So anyways, I was like, okay, I'll just teach group fitness and whatever. So he put me on the table and was showing me MAT. And after he worked on like some core and trunk muscles that he found weak, and I got up off the table and my feet felt great. I was like, how did you know like that I had fasciitis? I didn't tell you. He's like, I didn't know. I just worked on the muscles that were weak in your core. But what he didn't know is that I had been trying to get my fasciitis treated for 8 to 10 years. And everyone, of course, is looking at my knees and my feet and the bottoms of my feet and my arches and all that stuff. So after that experience, I was really intrigued by the idea. And then it just kind of rolled from there. I just jumped into the classes, and I really loved it. And I loved it because I felt like it really helped to bridge a lot of gaps that I saw between what we learned in school. Like, I went to University of Florida, which is a very heavy researched exercise school, but for some reason, like all of my classmates we all train like everyone else. I'm like, wait, how are we the smartest people about exercise and we train exactly like everyone else does? Shouldn't there be like some kind of difference going on here? So anyways, I just thought MAT really connected a lot of dots for me. And so that's what really intrigued me. And then I felt like, okay, with this knowledge, I can become a personal trainer. Without this knowledge, I would have never been a personal trainer because I just felt like there wasn't enough application that was ever taught in school and in certification classes, because there's just not a lot of application. I mean, we talk about like the research, and then it's very separate than what we do in terms of application. Like I felt like they were very disconnected. So that's what kind of got me into it. And I thought it was, I always love telling that story to my clients because it's really mind blowing for people when, like we like to all jump on the bandwagon of saying like, yeah, everything in the body is so connected, I could see how these things relate, but by the way, my feet are hurting, so could you just work on my feet? And I'm like, yeah, but that actually might not help you. And it didn't help in my story. It took someone actually looking at what muscles were working and what muscles were not working, independent of symptoms, for my symptoms to actually go away.
Well, and that was like one of the questions I wanted to ask was, how many people are coming to y'all because you're able to perform MAT versus how many people are just coming in for the personal training? And then if they're just coming in for the personal training, how do you try to get them onto the bandwagon of MAT?
Yeah, so it's actually our schedules are our schedules are pretty split. Where mine is about 90%, 90 to 95% of my week is MAT. Julie's a little, closer to 50-50, if not a little more training than MAT. Mm-hmm. And so then it's just really all about kind of educating our clients and talking to them about things. And I think it's for a lot of people weird when they go to an exercise place and the first thing we have them do is not stretching, is not foam rolling, is not all these things that they're maybe expecting or used to seeing when it comes to exercise. And so that usually brings up questions for them where it's like, oh, are we going to do any stretching? Oh, you don't have any foam rollers? And it's like, no. And they're like, okay, well, like I got this tightness going on. And then that opens up, the door for a conversation of, well, that's interesting. One of the things that, how we view tightness, and then kind of going down the road that way.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to consider what people's expectations are, So, just because we think that everyone should be training in our style and doing MAT doesn't mean that each client coming in also agrees with that. But what is really great, especially with my training clients, because as Charlie said, I see a lot of people that want to train, want to exercise. They want to come here, sweat, feel like they're getting stronger. But with the MAT mindset, it's so much easier to help people be consistent with that and not get injured with that because of the background of it. So although a lot of my I do a handful of my sessions are not like, this is an MAT session. All the knowledge of understanding muscle function really blends nicely in terms of keeping people safe and injury free, because that's the number one reason why people stop going to the gym. Well, I think one of the top three. I think people get bored and get injured. It's like, okay, if we can help someone not get injured, that would be a huge, battle to win right there.
Exactly. And that's for me, like growing up, my dad was always into bodybuilding and weightlifting. We always had a gym in our house. But it's one of those things where if you always have something, you kind of take it for granted. And so growing up, I kind of learned how to do some old-fashioned weightlifting, I guess. But, for the majority of my life, I was lazy and I didn't want to do it. And the main reason was it's just not fun to pump weights unless you have an ultimate goal in mind. And so I think right now where I'm at is, if I want to stay in shape, I want to do it in a way that's more fun or more just not dull and boring, like something crazy like kettlebell swings versus just lifting weights can add a little difference to the routine, or some natural movement stuff. Me and my professor, we do animal flow together sometimes. So just trying to make workouts fun for clients, I feel, is definitely a way to make them want to come back and continue to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a big component of it, right? It's like, okay, if every time somebody comes to you, they're super bored, well, guess what? They're probably not coming back, no matter how good you are at what you're doing, and no matter how good what you're doing is for them. So you definitely have to be able to appease people in that manner, keep them entertained in some form or fashion.
Or interested.
Exactly, yeah.
We'll bring this up, especially if you're interested in diving into MAT and or RTS, which is the training style we do. I have to say that our biggest attractor piece is that a lot of times when people work out with us, it's the first time that working out has felt somewhat productive and good. And you bring up we got to do new exercises and something that's entertaining. And I totally agree with that. I mean, people have to be interested. It has to be appealing, something new, or a unique touch to it. And I do have to argue that most trainers are decently entertaining. Mm-hmm. But most trainers can't bring the piece of, hey, I can consistently help you feel pretty dang awesome. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Outside of me having motivational quotes for you, I actually have tools to help figure out how we can make you feel great. So I love that you brought that up, because I think that the appeal has to be there. But at the same time, I think as you dive into exploring being a trainer or something in the field, is that there is, well, at least our niche is definitely a group of people that, has either been cycling in and out of exercise due to injury. It's like, I feel great for a while, I love exercise, but every 3 months I have to take 2 months off because then I'm injured. Or they have, a chronic ailment that, they're having to use exercise to help manage, but it will never fix. There's no fixing these ailments. And so it's a really unique niche that, again, yes, we got to keep it appealing, but also in the end, it's like, we got to help you also feel great so that you can keep doing this. Because this thing called exercise is the thing that's going to keep us healthy, keep us strong, keep us moving until, hopefully the day we die. I hope we're all moving, mobile, moderately strong, able to do stuff we want to do until, we die. So I just wanted to throw that in there, because it's actually a piece that I never thought of. I didn't know that was a thing before I was feeling that niche, because, I was in the regular gym industry just like where everyone else comes from. So I thought I'd throw that in there for some light bulbing effect.
Love it.
That's perfect. All right, shifting gears a little bit. So What would you say are some of the most common issues you see in clients when they're coming in, like specifically muscles? Like I know often people say glute amnesia is a common thing, tight hamstrings are common, hip flexors might be an issue. What other problems do you commonly see in clients that most people, or maybe not most, but a lot of people generally have?
So I think a lot that kind of goes undiscussed. So people acknowledge that, all right, hamstrings tight, low back's tight, hip flexors tight, all those things. I think a lot of people have issues with their feet.
I was going to say feet too.
And they don't realize that they have issues with their feet because they're so used to disconnecting their feet through, orthotics or super supportive shoes or all these things that are trying to take the place of their feet actually working. And so that tends to be probably out of any area of the body, the most common default option of, oh, your feet aren't working well. Cool. Let's put a support in there and then let's keep it there forever. And it's like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't know any other area of the body where that's common practice. Like, hey, if somebody's having a back issue and they're wearing a back brace for a period of time, there's usually also some kind of like strengthening exercise, something to, support this area, not just a brace happening as well. If somebody has a knee issue and they're wearing a brace for a period of time, there's usually some kind of exercise, strengthening, something else to support the knee going on. But for the feet, it's like, oh, here's some orthotics. Here are your supportive shoes.
It's a brace.
And all right, you're good for the rest of forever. Come back when these don't work anymore. We'll change them. And it's like, what? Dude, like 20% of your muscles are within your feet. Like, come on. Like there's such a great opportunity to strengthen that area of the body. And I think that's completely overlooked by most people, and especially when you don't go to the gym, or when you go to the gym rather. You don't see people doing foot exercises. If you do, it's a calf raise at most. But it's not like you go to the gym and there's all these different foot machines. So I think a lot of people miss that idea of, well, there are things you can do to strengthen your feet as well because it's not blatantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you guys have been focusing on that in your social medias on feet right now. And that's the focus. And I don't know if you noticed, but I commented like a hashtag Dr. Emily Splickle, who's a founder of EBFA, Evidence-Based Fitness Academy. Mm-hmm. I don't know if y'all have heard of her. And she also has a company called Nabosa Technologies, and they create these insoles, and they're very thin. They're like maybe a few millimeters thick, and they have these little nubs on them that are proprioceptive. And they're completely flat. So they're not arch supported insoles like you would traditionally see. And they found a lot of benefit with people who have Parkinson's disease when they wear these insoles. And I actually have a pair of sandals that they're like built into that I got from Zero Shoes. And I can kind of tell the difference. It's like if you're indoors and you're wearing that, it's like being outdoors and barefoot. Like you're picking up so much stimulus through your foot and you're able to, I guess, adjust yourself. I don't know how much of it's placebo. Like, I feel like there's still needs to be more research done into it, but sure. It's very interesting. And if it does, help clients, like, dang, like that's awesome.
That's cool.
I think we're definitely in a routine of it being normalized that we disconnect with our feet. So it kind of seems like that those insoles, maybe it's almost like if you had a rock in your shoe, all of a sudden, your big toe that you don't ever think about, now you keep thinking about it because there's something poking into it. So it's almost like, to me in my head, I'm thinking maybe these insoles have something that gives some kind of feedback to your brain so that you're actually thinking about your feet a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think from a very young age, we actually have a 1-year-old daughter, and I'm looking for shoes for her, and I'm like, why do these like first walking shoes have arch supports in them? What? Mm-hmm. So I'm already telling my 1-year-old that has the most flexible, mobile, strong feet ever. Like, if you look at her walking, I told Charlie, I'm like, we need to get a video of her feet while she's learning how to walk, because you'll just see like every little muscle contracting in her feet, which is like exactly what's supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, we put on these stiff shoes on these little tiny feet, and automatically this foot that just had like 50 ranges of motion just turned into maybe 1 or 2 ranges of motion that she can now accomplish. So So far, I've only found water shoes that I will let her wear because, like I can literally do this. I'm like, this shoe should not be imposing anything on her foot except for protection from rocks.
Exactly.
And that's exactly like what needs to happen as actually, I don't want to say that. It's not exactly what needs to happen when you're an adult. The problem is that a lot of us get symptoms up the chain due to foot issues. Maybe not due to foot issues, but many are. I would say feet are definitely a huge like epicenter of muscle imbalances. And you can confirm that when you talk to someone and you say, hey, have you ever tried not wearing shoes around your house? And they're like, oh no, I could never not. Actually, I get out of bed and I put my shoes. I get out of bed and I put them right in the shoes because I can't handle being flat. So it's actually not, I don't think it's a huge issue that people wear arch supported shoes. I think the issue is that thing right there could be the thing that's causing you issues somewhere else that's stopping you from doing what you're wanting to do. For example, like golfers and back pain or something like that. So what our job as trainers and muscle people is figuring out how can we strengthen someone's foot so that they can start tolerating doing more stuff. Right now, they can only tolerate a really supportive shoe, for example. Like, I can only handle it when I have my brace on, which is an orthotic. So we need to train you to not need so much bracing, which might be years of conditioning the feet, which is weird to think about. You think like, oh, because everyone thinks like they wake up and their feet are just ready to go. Actually, we think we wake up and we think our muscles should be ready to go. But actually, our muscles, including the muscles in our feet, need a lot of input to stay healthy and stay functioning well.
Exactly. I think that zero shoes might make child shoes. I'm not sure about that, but I would definitely look into that because like the main thing I like about them is like they're just a generic minimalist shoe. But the one thing they kind of have that a lot of other shoes don't is they have a very wide toe box, so your toes are able to like splay out.
Those are the sandals that I have. The zero sandals.
You have zero sandals?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So like, yeah, I would maybe use those, just try to get her barefoot, I guess, as much as possible. But, that was me growing up, like generic American, like only Asian people take off their shoes when they go inside, like we always keep our shoes on, even if we're like sitting on a couch and putting our feet up on the ottoman, like got to keep the shoes on no matter what. And I'm like, oh, what the heck was wrong with my parents? Like, why didn't they know the damage I was doing to my body? Okay, so, generic chiropractor, let's say you go in maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. You go in, they do an adjustment, you leave, and, basically as soon as you get off the table, like your bones have gone back into the place they were because most of the time they're not addressing the muscles. They're trying to just realign the spine. Some of them are pretty good about, addressing muscles. I'm not going to say all chiropractors, but like, I guess the generic chiropractor, you go in once every week, they help you feel better for a few days, and then you have to go back in because you're feeling the same. So how does MAT compare to that? When a client comes in, how often are you having to redo a specific muscle in order for it to get better? Or do you see like progress over time? Like maybe they come in once every week for a while, but then after a while, like they'll only be coming in once every 6 months for that one muscle, and then eventually it's just gone.
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the client's tolerance to stresses. It depends on how stressful the client's life is. And then it depends on kind of how long the issue has been an issue for them. All right. So, for example, if there is a recent issue, all right, let's say, I don't know, let's say somebody they sprain their ankle or whatever, okay, and they come in and acute ankle sprain, just recently happened. There's hasn't been a ton of time for a lot of compensation to happen around that, okay? So you can address the muscles that need to be addressed, and that's usually a quicker turnaround, if the individual is healthy, versus, we hear this all the time, somebody sprains their ankle, 15, 20 years ago, it's no longer symptomatic, but now they've been compensating around that ankle for 15, 20 years, even though it's asymptomatic, okay? Now they have more ingrained compensations within their central nervous system, and so now it can be a longer process in that regard. So how long does the work last? Really until the client exceeds their own tolerance level for stress for that particular muscle, okay? And for some people, that's getting up and walking around the office, and for other people, they can go out and they can run a half marathon. They'll be completely fine. So it's very, very individual dependent. But the consistent thing is the work holds until the tolerance level of the muscles are exceeded. But one of the goals of MAT is not just to address the issues that are present in the moment, but also to build up the tolerance of the tissues over time so that people can continue to do more and more things in their life, and there are fewer issues that come up. So yeah, I mean, we've had it where somebody comes in and then the next week they come back and we're needing to rework on those things. I've also had it where somebody comes in, work on them, and I see them a bunch over the course of a year, but then a year later I'm checking my notes and I'm like, wow, we haven't had to work on this thing that we're working on today for over a year. So it's super individual dependent.
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. From what research I've seen of MAT, like I really feel that it's something that could be greatly utilized in like the toolbox of a lot of personal trainers and physical therapists. And it's really like a shame that it's not more known. Like even in like where I live, like I tried looking up, okay, where are some MAT practitioners around me? And I think there's maybe 2 in my state. Like there's hardly anyone, and like the 2 that are in my state are on the opposite ends of the state that I am.
Well, going back to like one of the things you said earlier, we're hoping that really starts to change now that the majority of the education is online, because before, what was one of the biggest limiting factors for people going through the education system is they had to go to select hubs or they had to get to Denver. So if you look at the density of practitioners like in Chicago or in Colorado, very, very high density of practitioners in Chicago, in Toronto, in Colorado, in Seattle, and it's because historically these places have hosted a number of courses. But now that the entire education model is brought online, you don't have to commute to one of these hubs nearly as frequently as you used to have to. And so we're seeing that there is a much greater reach as far as the geographic locations of the students now, which is really neat. And so I think that's going to be something that really helps MAT as an education company spread and MAT as a technique spread.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I feel like the online is definitely something that a lot of these programs are making a switch to right now because, coronavirus going on. So they've kind of been forced to put a lot of their programs online, at least for the time being, hopefully for a while. A lot of times I do feel like you kind of need to get that hands-on and like in-person experience.
Yes.
But there's a lot of times where you can educate yourself just by doing specific readings or, going through like programs online.
Yeah.
So like, I'm really happy to hear about that because it really does make things easier.
Oh, for sure. And so to that point, there still is an in-person requirement. But like when Julie and I went through, we had to go to the in-person part every single month. And now with the online portion, you get feedback. You go through, you watch lectures that have been taped from live classes. You have the ability to ask questions on forums. You get assignments, written assignments and practical assignments. And you are able to, then you have to like video record yourself. You put those videos unlisted onto YouTube. So then you send it to the instructor. The instructor watches it, gives you feedback. So you're getting that critique, and then you go to your day and a half practical weekend, and now all of a sudden you crank through all that material that you spent the last 12 weeks learning, and we find that the practical weekends become much more productive because students are coming in better prepared, having practiced for the last 6 to 12 weeks, as opposed to sitting there being floored with all this information that's brand new, and then being expected to practice it, and then, okay, see you in 4 weeks, and then you come back and you're doing the whole thing again.
Yeah.
So one other question I had was, do y'all have any other certifications you were currently looking at, or are you kind of satisfied where you are?
So for me personally, I don't have a desire to at this moment. And the reason is because I'm trying to still do MAT the best at it, as well as it can be done. And so that's the thing that drives me. I'm as Julie can attest to, I'm a person that goes really deep on one thing as opposed to, spread my attention out on a whole bunch of different things. So I found something that I can go really deep in. And, my thing is I'm trying to do this thing as well as it can be done. And so I don't have interest in diverting my attention and trying to learn something new. Just really trying to refine what I'm doing right now.
I wish I was that way. I've got bad ADHD, so I'm always just touching the surface of the water everywhere versus diving deep in one little spot. And so I'm the kind of person where I got that hoarder mentality. I'm like, oh, I want this certification and this certification, and you can't really have it all. But yeah, I think that's a good point that you kind of made, is that the body is really complex. And so even in just one of these paradigms, you're going to have to dive deep into it. And it's going to take a long time for you to actually feel like you've mastered it. Right. And it's kind of reassuring for me to hear that MAT is that complex. At the same time, it's kind of intimidating. If I ever pursue that path, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? What if I want to go study something else?
Well, you don't have to try to do it at the level that we're doing. I mean, there are plenty of people that, go and they just get exposure and they're like, wow, this is really cool. And they're able to start applying it instantly. But for me, it's when I see and when I hear what Greg is able to do with MAT, it's okay, well, until I even start to get close to that, I'm not doing this as well as it can be done. And so for me, that's my driver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also don't think I will do any other certifications. I did a lot before I found MAT and RTS. But as soon as I started taking MAT and RTS is resistance training specialist, we haven't talked that much about that. Mm-hmm. They're both processes that teach you how to think. And once you can learn how to think about exercise, muscle function, joint function, how anatomy works, how the structure of anatomy works, it allows you to create your own stuff, meaning based off of science and facts. Versus every other certification I had taken up to that point seemed like I would leave the class with 20 more exercises to shove in my bag. Mm-hmm. Versus whenever I take or learn more or think about or study my MAT and RTS material, I don't leave with 20 more exercises in my backpack, but I do leave, how would I rationalize or figure out or problem solve for a situation like this? And so instead of having, X number more exercises, I now can apply principles to any situation, which allows me to be able to work with someone that is fully capable, feels great, loves to work out, can push it really hard. I can work with that. And I can also work with the person that has MS in a walker and they need to be exercising, but no one else knows how to help them. And so it allows for the scope when you can understand how muscles function and how to categorize and think about exercise in your brain. So that's what MAT and RTS brought to the table for me. So it has killed my interest in any other certification. And I'm not saying there's not value there, but it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so I every time another certification comes around, even in the description, I look at something and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not going to take that because I'll be able to debunk all that, or I don't know. It's just not. I just once I was exposed with the principles of how to think about it and how to create it for yourself, then my mind was blown, and I was like, all right, great, I can study this for the rest of my life and still not know it all, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I can still help a ton of people with it, and I can help them in a way that no one else is helping them. And so that there is what brought all the value to me. And I hope that you can find something that you love just like that, and that's how it works for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. But definitely check out the RTS program as well. And it will be, especially if you are looking to go down the personal training route, it will be second to none from a hands-on, practical, how do you work with a client and make decisions with a client perspective. And then when you can combine that with MAT, I mean, you're going to be so far apart from every other trainer as far as what options you have to work with a client, because you have, like Julie was saying, these principles to work off of, as opposed to, I haven't been taught an exercise to do that. You're like, well, I can create an exercise to do that because I understand these principles.
One thing Tom Purvis, the owner and founder of RTS, always brings up, and I think it paints the perfect picture, is like, think about, okay, you have a client come in and you have these preconceived ideas of what you might start them with. Like, oh, well, let me like test like how high they can step or how far they can reach or whatever. And the greatest thing about an RTS person is that we would be able to help create something for the person that can't do any of the baseline assessments that you thought they should be able to do. And I think that is like a huge rock in RTS, is just being able to be able to wipe out all the like preconceived or protocol type actions or exercises.
And that kind of brought me to one of my other questions was, how, like, if I decide to pursue the personal training versus athletic training or other master's degree, whether that be MAT or something else, is if I do go down the personal training route, I would get my CSCS after I get my bachelor's, and then I'd probably try to work for a few years, and eventually I would try to open up my own business. How hard was it for y'all to open up your own business?
Very hard.
So only open up your own business if you really actually want to run your own business. If you want to train people, go find a place to go train people and train them. If you want to be a business owner and you want to actually run a business, then open up a business. But if you're opening up a business to train people, then there's going to be a conflict there. So if you want to train people, find a place to train people. If you want to run a business, then open up a business. But it's too many people get into the aspect of opening up a business because they want to train people. And at the end of the day, you have to open up a business because you want to run a business. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So my thought, every time somebody says, oh yeah, I want to go open up my own business, I'm like, why? Why? Because, all right, look, like,
you're passionate about exercise,
right? Like, if it fits you and that's really what you want to do, awesome, go for it. Because look, I could not go and work for anybody else. No,
me neither.
No way. Okay, but that's how I'm built. That's how we're built. Okay, that's how we think. That's how we view the world. But if I was like, okay, yeah, like, I don't really love how this person's running their business, but I really just want to train and they don't bother me any. Dude, take that every single time, 100%, because it's going to be far fewer headaches, much less, way less work for you.
Way less.
And you're going to make way more money doing that. You're going to be able to help way more people doing that. You're going to have to work way fewer hours doing, like, your quality of life will be so much higher. You'll actually be able to put your time and energy into training people as opposed to doing all these other things that you have to do when you open up your business because you want to train people. And it's like, you had that before and now you've just gone and opened up this whole can of worms. So if you want to run a business, then by all means, go and open a business and run a business. But if you want to train people, find a place to train people. And that's what I would tell anybody, because as much as I love doing it, and as much as like we both say, like we could not work for somebody else, most people aren't like that. And most people who open up their own business aren't like that. And if I can save you 5, 10, 15 years of pulling your hair out and being stressed and, wondering like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to cover my overhead plus feed myself plus,
and who's going to clean my toilets
right,
and market and
exactly,
like who's
do
going to
my
make
books
sure
and
yeah,
all that
exactly.
stuff. If I can save you, a decade and a half of that, and just say, dude, if you just want to go train people, then just do that. But if you're up for all the other stuff, by all means, it will be an amazing experience that you have. It will be one of the brightest parts of your entire day if you are built for that. But you have to be built for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely two different jobs. It's like, when you're passionate about what was the book we read? The E-Myth. It's like the entrepreneurial myth. It's like we think like, oh, I'm an amazing trainer. I love to train. Yep. I do something unique. My clients love me, so I should open my own business.
Yep.
But now you've just become this person that could spend all of their time investing in their education. How can I help people more? How can I create a better program? Now, probably, I don't know, in the beginning, 90% of your time now has to be figured out, well, how do I register my business? How do I find a spot? How do I make sure it stays clean and welcoming? What am I going to do about the leak that's in the, all the stuff that comes with entrepreneurial, which, by the way, we only have 100% of our own time in the day. And if that entrepreneurial time gets taken away from your training time.
Yeah.
So they're both great. They're just different. And so we'll just leave you with that token of knowledge.
I would highly advise you to go read the book, The E-Myth Revisited. And I mean, you can get it on Amazon, a whole bunch of different places. But that would just help shed some perspective on, okay, what does it actually start to take to run a business? And then from there, you can decide whether or not that's something that you want to do down the road. Mm-hmm. It'll always be an option for you, but it'll at least provide that perspective.
Yeah. And we have colleagues that do almost everything we do. And some have their own business and do it and love it. And some don't and love it. They work out of a club gym or a private studio. They just don't own it. It's not their business. So that they can just focus on their little piece of the pie in that studio. So, everything works differently for different people.
Golden. I guess we can start wrapping up here. I guess I'll have just like one or two more questions. I guess one big last question I would have to ask is, what is one thing in like modern Western society that you think needs to change in order for people to become more healthy? Whether it be, like less junk food or less like screen time, more sleep, anything random. Like, what do you think is like one of the biggest things that you would like to see changed?
I know mine.
All right, you can start.
And you have to help me with this,
okay,
because we actually listened to an amazing podcast on this. But I think there's a huge lack of muscle building. I think there's a lot of focus on weight loss and, whatever. But I think that there needs to be a lot more focus on building muscle tissue. That doesn't mean that I think everyone should look like they're freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger walking around, which people cannot look like that unless that's like a serious life dedication. But yeah, exactly. But I think that too many people undervalue what muscle building would do for their lifestyle and their life. I think that muscle building right now is really labeled as people that want to be like fit and healthy, and people that don't value fitness or health that much, which I don't care if you don't value it, but I do care if you can't do the stuff you want to do in your life. And that right there is caused mostly because people have not maintained their muscle function. And so I think resistance training needs to be a huge focus for every single human that walks this earth, because a lot of us aren't walking it. A lot of us are so sedentary that we need to be focusing on muscle building. And most times when you talk to like doctors about exercise and stuff, they're always talking about like cardiovascular health and heart health. And so often we forget about muscle health. And there's not really a doctor that focuses on that, I don't think.
Right. Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Totally agree with everything Julie said, and she is right on with that. I am going to go a slightly different direction because otherwise I'd be repeating exactly what she said. And I will say, do something every single day to make yourself uncomfortable. And I think I say that because so often in Western society, we are seeking out things to try to make ourselves more comfortable, as opposed to figuring out what we can do to actually make ourselves better, to actually be able to raise our own abilities to meet the situation, as opposed to trying to take the situation and take the environment that we're in and bring it down to meet us where we're at. And so it's more of a mentality thing. But I think, so often, so I mean, like just going back with the whole, the foot example, right? It's like, okay, well, I have the option of trying to make my feet stronger, or I can put in these orthotics. The orthotics are, quick, easy fix, and boom, all right, good. Now I'm comfortable. As opposed to being like, okay, well, you know what? I can take the next 6 weeks. I can take the next, 6 months and really focus on trying to get my feet stronger. And now I have, a better functioning body. And going with that, so often we default for the easy, comfortable route, which is, okay, well, let's find something external to try to support us, as opposed to trying to build our internal reserves, our internal function, our internal health to be better for the situation around us. So that's is probably a different avenue than you were maybe thinking I would go when you pose the question, but I want to reiterate what Julie said, because what Julie said is so important. So I wanted to then kind of add to that with I guess a different direction as well.
And that's something like I've been trying to incorporate in my life for the last year or so. I do like little random things to kind of make me more embrace more discomfort, I guess. So I started sleeping on the floor, which at first was weird, but now it's gotten to the point where I can lay on basically any hard floor as long as it's got a little like cushion to it, like carpet or something, and I can easily fall asleep. It's kind of weird. And then the other thing I've started doing is I've started using my car as a sauna during the summer. I just go and sit in my car, and I'll study some Quizlets in there, and I'll get a massive sweat going. I'll be dying, and then after 30 minutes, I'll leave, and I'll feel amazing. It's cheap, it's free, you don't have to.
I love that. That's awesome.
Hot cars can save lives too,
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's too funny. Yeah,
It's a great idea.
I'll do the Converse here during the winter, where I'll use it as a my own personal cryo chamber. I'll just go sit in the snow outside. So we get that up here. Yeah, exactly.
Charlie, one of his routine discomfort things is he'll take a cold shower, like at the end of your shower or whatever, and just turn it cold real quick. And my family's from Florida, so when we go visit them, he's like, y'all's water doesn't get very cold here. It feels pretty warm when I turn it all cold.
That's so funny. I do the same thing, but mostly just to close my pores up afterward, because if you're using the hot shower, your pores are open, and dirt and stuff and bacteria can get inside, and that's how you get a lot of acne. And so doing the cold shower really does help with your skin.
Nice.
Added bonus.
Right,
I like
there.
it.
Yeah, there you go.